Shalom Chavrim, I'm Stephen Ben-Nun. You're watching Israeli News Live. Got to tighten up the seatbelt, guys. Bad news, more bad news, but of course, biblical prophecy about to completely come unglued there in Syria, I am afraid. We're going to be talking about these things tonight. We are looking at, right now on your screen, the French version of Sputnik News. It's the first place I actually saw this come out on is on Sputnik. It's asking me in French to accept the cookies here. I'll just click on that real quick. You know, it's funny. I used to speak French fluently as a child. Can't remember very much of it now, although when I do hear it, I tend to pick up a little bit on what's being said. At any rate, make sure you guys can hear us okay over there. Just make sure if you give us a thumbs up so I'll know that everybody is okay on the volume and things that are happening there. Let me just quickly get rid of some of this just so I can see what's going on, and because I don't want to run into a situation to where nobody is hearing anything. All right, great deal. All right, cool. Thank you very much. Thank you, moderators, as well. Let me get back over what's going on here. Very serious situation we're dealing with, and quite frankly, I think I can actually run this with the YouTube channel. Well, maybe not closed. I don't know. Don't know how that works. At any rate, the French newspaper is, the French Sputnik version in French here is stating that Russia's MOD is reported that in Syria there is a major group right now. It is part of the Al-Nusra group there. It is called the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, that are amassing huge amounts of terrorists there, both towards Hama in the south and towards Aleppo. They're planning on doing their own offensive. I'm sure this has totally taken the Syrian government completely off guard. Let me kind of give you an idea where we're looking at. Idlib, of course, is right here. Aleppo just to the north, and the Syrian government controls Aleppo. Hama to the south, down here, and of course, this whole area here, like this here, is what they have control of. Well, they've amassed troops here for an attack on Hama, as well as troops on the northern side to attack Aleppo. I don't think that Bashar al-Assad was even anticipating that Idlib would launch its own offensive, whereas the Syrian government is preparing for their own offensive against these terrorists that are in Idlib. Now they may end up with not only trying to liberate Idlib, but end up with two more fronts opening up, Hama and Aleppo, once again. This could be a major game changer, friends, especially Turkey backing them. And with Turkey backing them, Aleppo could really get hit hard from Azaz, from the north here, where Turkey would send in their own terrorists across the northern region there, as well as from the west. Now, I say this, let me share with you, a lot of things are happening. Russia claims rebels planning the Idlib chemical weapons attack. That's another big issue on the board. This is being reported, of course, on DW, Made for Minds, their name of their website there. The Kremlin has claimed that rebels are planning a chemical weapons attack with the intent of blaming it on Syria. Russia also says that British contractor is helping the militants. A British contractor. All right, watch this here. Of course, by the way, that is one of the staged photos that were being used. You're going to get to see some things, guys, in here in just a few minutes. It's going to really, really rock your brain. And then we're going to really start to break down scripturally and analyze what's going on. You know, again, I picked too hot of a shirt to wear. I'll just have to try to deal with this. The ministry has issued a statement quoting unnamed sources claiming that jihadi group Levant Liberation Committee, also known as the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, is preparing an attack against the civilians in the Syria's northwestern Idlib province, just as I said before. Ministry spokesman Igor Kanashkanov said in a statement the jihadist group is preparing another provocation of the use of chemical weapons by Syrian government forces against the peaceful population of the Idlib province. Russian military sources claim that several chlorine-filled containers had been delivered first to the town of Yasir al-Shakhur and then to nearby village. The ministry also claimed that a private British contractor is helping the rebels stage the attack, according to the news agency AFP. All right, the militants have the task of simulating the rescue of the victims of the chemical weapons attack, dressed in clothes of the famous white helmets, it said. I mean, listen, this is what happened in Mosul, on the outskirts of Damascus. In fact, the Tiger forces captured British and Americans in this battle. It was a major embarrassment for both the U.S. and the British forces, but oddly enough, it was never mentioned in mainstream media out in the West. That was kept pretty much hush-hush, while these American and British forces were being held prisoner. This is one reason we saw Israel doing heavy bombardment against Iranian targets all around the Damascus area on the outskirts there. They were trying to soften up the Syrian Tiger forces in order to get these American and British forces rescued. It didn't work. I don't think it was until Helsinki that actually took place, as far as from what I can gather thus far, or even if they were even released for that matter. I want to move over here to Vanessa Beeley, though. She posted here a tweet on her Twitter page, Vanessa Beeley, at Vanessa Beeley. Staging of chemical attack in Idlib reported prepped by the Olive Group, that's the British group, by the way, who James Lemassoure used to work for, founder of the White Helmets. Imagine that. OG merged with Constellists in 2015, who have Blackwater in their portfolio. Now, she gives you all the links to the news articles, starting with RT, and then she begins to break this down, how they built up this White Helmet group and the connections between the different groups like Blackwater, the U.S. military operations contractors that worked mostly in Iraq. Also, they're working in Ukraine presently, and even in Syria. Much like even Russia. Russia does the same. Russia has the Wagner Group, and the Wagner Group is operating, of course, in Syria. They've been working in Ukraine as well, and even in Central Africa. We've seen the Wagner Group there. In fact, invited by the European Union under the United Nations control. So that's why I really get suspicious about some of these things. I think they all work together. She notes in here, May 2015, Olive Group merged with Constellius Holdings portfolio includes the Academy, previously the notorious Blackwater Group. Post 9/11, Bush enabled the CIA and subcontract assassinations allegedly targeting Al-Qaeda and operatives Blackwater. All right. She goes on in number 3, founder by the former Coldstream Guards and Parachute Regiment officers Chris St. George and his brother 13 years ago. Olive is the UK's largest security providers, which specializes in looking after oil companies such as BP and Royal Dutch Shell operating in hostile environments. She notes in number 4, British security company Olive Group plans to expand its operations in Africa, the Middle East, for completing a multi-million-pound merger with one of the largest risk management firms in America, Constellius Group. And of course, the article that goes with that. This is all in the description below, by the way. You can look this up for yourself. I won't continue to go through all of them there, but Vanessa makes a very powerful case of the British and the U.S. forces that are involved in the training, that in the creation of the White Helmets and all the propaganda those used. No, actually, there is one thing I do want to bring out. Let me move down further. This was one that was a response to what Vanessa put up by E. Wagner, and she posted this group of photos, okay, that are staged propaganda pieces by the White Helmets. All right, now, look at this here. This is unbelievable. You have their director, they got their White Helmets uniforms, they got some of their victims here ready, lights are staged around, and they're literally, in Arabic, doing it like they're doing a movie. It's unreal. Jeez, I don't know. Maybe this is part of their Last Man Standing documentary that they were doing, right? This one right here as well. They take and prepare this girl up, put the makeup on her, make her look like her face has been ripped halfway open, and lay her down over here, and she's laying in there as if she was nearly just torn apart. This is the type of things that are going on, friends, and the world should be outraged by it, but they're not, because we've been so dumbed down in believing the mainstream media that nobody really pays attention on what's really going on in the world. All right? Now, so we are on the verge of a major escalation there in the Middle East. This article here on Bloomberg, U.S. warns Russia it will hit Assad if he uses chemical arms, says a source. They're going to hit Assad. All right? So This is a game changer. This is what we're going to look at this from a biblical aspect here in just a few moments here. It says here the U.S. and Russia exchanged warnings about a possible chemical attack in Syria and Western military intervention in response on the eve of what may be one of the decisive campaigns in the Middle Eastern country's civil war. Tensions between the nuclear powers flared after National Security Advisor John Bolton told his Russian counterpart, Nikolai Patrushev, that the U.S. has informed Syria's President Bashar al-Assad may be preparing to use chemical weapons to recapture the northwestern province of Idlib from rebels. There is no way Assad would use chemical weapons on his own people. And the sad thing is, we have proven this from the evidence, the most compelling evidence of all, which comes out of Turkey's own parliament. We've proven this over and over and over. And yet people are still following the mainstream narrative. Or you're following, the newly founded, I don't know, what is it, about 2 years old now, Israeli propaganda piece that poses to be a Christian that, if they're a Christian, it's the most blinded propaganda pieces I've ever seen coming out of the Middle East, allegedly intelligence operative, former military, etc. All right? Now, I don't doubt that there's not an intelligence connection there, because believe me, this man would not know the intelligence that he has known about things that are going on in the battlefield without a connection that would give him direct access to U.S. military intelligence that was being shared by Russia over in the case of Khan Sheikhoun. Because in Khan Sheikhoun, this individual was revealing the name of the pilot, etc., as if the Israeli military knew everything about it. Well, yeah, sure they did. Because Russia was sharing with the U.S. government, including the CIA, which I served nearly 7 years with, about the intelligence that was going on there in the middle, that was going on as far as the bombing, the very plane, the pilot. Russia told both their sources with the U.S. military in cooperation in their operations that were happening at the time, and still do that cooperation. But then Russia took it a step further, and they informed the CIA in the event that they had operatives working on the ground, embedded amongst the different fighting factions, including the Al-Sham, Al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda that were going to be meeting at this place in Khan Sheikhoun. They let them know the pilot's name, the bomb, the guided ordnance that would be on the plane, very much like that of some of the U.S.'s larger bombs there that would take out the entire building. All right? All this was shared with them. So yes, if you got your connections in the intelligence community, you can find out a lot of things, especially if you still have a clearance. So, but the issue is, what's strange to me is that how that the mainstream media propaganda is followed rather than telling the people the real truth. You know, if I just parrot what CNN and Fox and all the rest of them say, or mainly the news like Fox, if I just parrot to you what Fox says and we hold Trump up on a pedestal as the greatest Christian that they've ever known in their lives, and then you just find out that the man is sleeping with other women while he's married to his wife, and this is supposed to be the greatest Christian you've ever known. I mean, come on, give me a break. Somebody's got to wake up. You know, I mean, my desire is for everyone to recognize Yeshua to be the Messiah. And for those that are of my own kindred, my own blood, I want them to recognize Yeshua to be the Messiah. Of course, today we get this famous thing, you know, well, Steve, you're just too white to be a Jew. You got that pale complexion, red hair. You're a descendant of Esau. You know, I put up here, I'm going to share this on Facebook, and I have it actually here, so I'll share it with you guys. This is my mother and my great-grandmother right here, her grandmother, giving her a bath when my mother was a little bitty baby there. And as you can see, my complexion looks nothing like my great-grandmother. I actually lived with my great-grandmother until I was 13 years old. And her last name is Ziegler. She was a Sephardic Jew. And of course, no doubt you can tell she's Sephardic because she has that definitely Middle Eastern complexion. In fact, she would make most Jews in America, most Jews that are living in Israel look like light-skinned. But see, that changes in time. It just depends on, you know, what else is in your background. My father's mother, for example, was very light-complected and had a reddish hair. And that's where I got my looks from. Come from the other side. But you cannot base Jewishness over skin color. That's just completely wrong because that can easily change, and it doesn't take but 1 or 2 births away to change it. Even as you saw my mother, she was much lighter than her grandmother. And there again, that's because her mother favored her father. And so who knows? Who knows all these things? It doesn't matter there. The point is, we have a major crisis here going on in the Middle East here right now, and we are about to see this thing blow completely out of the water. Another article on the Jerusalem Post, and why the Jerusalem Post always does this to me. Run the article all the way down. Moscow warns Washington against reckless steps in Syria. That also coming out, as it said it earlier. They're both threatening each other back and forth. Moscow senior Russian official warned the United States on Saturday against making any reckless moves in Syria. And yeah, I didn't turn the air conditioner on, so I am burning up in here, guys. So I got to click it on. Give me 1 second, friends. I hate to do that, but jeez. You know, when you're the cameraman, the computer guy, you run all the different aspects here, then you're bound to forget something. In order to be able to see the screen behind me, you have to have the lights on, and there are some very strong lights, and of course they put out a lot of heat as well. So I'm dealing with all that at the same time. So Russia is also warning that they're going to respond, and in fact it's such a bad situation that Russia is not playing around. If the U.S. starts this time around, Russia may very well strike back, knocking down any missiles that the U.S. sends in there. And Russia's also moved some extra anti-aircraft batteries into the country to do exactly that. Now, we're not talking about the S-300, S-400 system, but it looks like that Russia may seriously get involved in protecting Syria this time, especially in light of the fact that the U.S. is threatening to take Assad out on this particular move as well. Now, I would not be a bit surprised if the U.S., if they were to try to go after Assad, doesn't use Israel for that purpose, because Russia and Israel have a closer relationship than what Russia does with the U.S. And Russia would be less inclined to take out the Israeli warplane or intercept an Israeli bomb near Damascus in the event that the Israelis do this because of their relationships together. But we are really starting to see a very serious situation here. And of course, Turkey and Russia have been somewhat allies, but I've always said Russia is playing with fire when it comes to Turkey. Now, the whole issue, though, is about chemical weapons, right? another false flag or another Assad is going to use chemical weapons as he has done in the past. All right? I know I've shared Aaron Erdem with you guys over and over again, and I feel that it is imperative that I share with you once again Aaron Erdem. Not just Aaron Erdem, but we're going to bring up real quick about Seymour Hersh, the global research, and prove once again that the Assad government, though they've done no doubt bad things as well, are not guilty of using the sarin gas on their own people. All right, now before I speak about Aaron Erdem, I think the best thing, because we have to go back in time and look what happened. Remember Benghazi, and how that when Benghazi, when the Libyan government fell, of course we had a diplomat that was killed there. Hillary Clinton was accused of allowing this man's death, with a CIA operative stationed not far from there. And of course they did a movie on this. They never tell you the truth in the movie what's going on. But the CIA was very much involved in trying to smuggle weapons from Libya at the fall of the Libyan government to Prime Minister Erdogan in Turkey. All right? So we need to back up to that just for a moment. This here is on... it's a website called medium.com. They're only writing about what the American award-winning journalist Seymour Hersh put together. Seymour Hersh is a very well-respected American journalist, investigative journalist. He has been blackballed by the mainstream media because of his honesty. But I want to share with you just a little bit about what he says in this article right here. Very short. We don't need to go much into it. Get it big enough so you guys can all see this. Seymour Hersh's article, The Red Line and the Rat Line, was the name of the article he wrote. Obama, Erdogan, and the Syrian rebels detailed how the Syrian jihadi group, Jabhat al-Nusra, aided by Turkish intelligence, could have been behind the first sarin gas attacks in an attempt to provoke the U.S. into full-scale military intervention to overthrow President Bashar al-Assad. It is not true that the Syrian state, the German paper Der Welt, has since run a report alleging that the sarin did not come from the Syrian government. All right? So Die Welt also believes that the Syrian government didn't do it, but from stockpiles held by jihadist rebel group al-Nusra. Now, Aaron Erdem said it was ISIS that actually it was given to. It says the U.S. and Turkey have been training Nusra fronts in chemical weapons. According to global research, United Nations in 2013 report confirms that the Syrian opposition rebels, supported by Washington, used chemical weapons against civilians and the government forces. All right? Credible sources report sarin came from Turkey in 2013. In November 2016, the New York Times acknowledged that ISIS had used chemical arms at least 52 times in Syria and Iraq. All right? Now, you can click on the links to all of those type articles, like in the case of the New York Times. ISIS used chemical arms at least 52 times in Syria and Iraq, report says. Right? Washington Islamic State used chemical weapons including chlorine and sulfur mustard agents at least 52 times on the battlefield in Syria. Okay? So any of these articles inside of here that you want to look at, a UK article right here, Belfast Telegraph, sarin gas material sent to ISIS from Turkey, claims MP Aaron Erdem. And that's who we're going to focus on is Aaron Erdem. But Seymour Hersh, there was actually, I believe it was an American woman that was a journalist there as well in Turkey that ended up being murdered. I got to bring her up on here actually to share who she was. Seymour Hersh actually expounded on her own research, and she was fearing for her life, and sure enough, they killed her before she could get out of Turkey with the information that she had. But Aaron Erdem, why do I say Aaron Erdem is the most credible source in this? Aaron Erdem, let me blow up the screen here for you. Aaron Erdem, at the time, was a member of parliament in Turkey. This was before the coup happened. This is when the newspaper was still being able to report in Turkey somewhat without too much censorship. Now, since the fake coup in Turkey, Erdogan cracked down and he imprisoned all these journalists that were revealing what was really going on. But it's not just about newspapers. As you notice, I have Aaron Erdem on the cover picture of this video, and I actually show on there where he's holding up the paper with Erdogan. Let me see, I think maybe I have that. Let me see if I have that on the pictures here. No, I don't. Let me see. I want to pull this up real quick, though. Give me 1 second. Yeah, here it is right here. The reason why this is so important, he's actually holding it up, and the article on the newspaper has Erdogan's name in Turkish, and this was about Erdogan transferring weapons through his country sent to ISIS. He also talks about how that the Turkish government was arming Al-Qaeda in the country as well. And so I chose that because it really brings out a point. And of course, you know, the truth is always going to be suppressed. But Aaron Erdem has a much more powerful argument because he's before his own parliament, before his own government, and he is trying to help the people to understand that his government had arrested the very ISIS militants that would be released to carry the sarin gas into Syria. All right? But he goes much deeper. And this is what I find about him that's so objective. He even speaks against Assad. He also speaks of several instances of other things that happened, including how that the Turkish government allowed suicide bombers to detonate themselves when they could have stopped them, which shows the implication that the Turkish government was trying to make themselves look like a victim of terrorism to justify going into Syria. I didn't catch that when I first, you know, this is only like a 10-minute segment, and I'm only going to play 3 minutes of this, but I never caught that before. I listened to the whole hour-long speech that he gave before his parliament. But this man is extremely unbiased, in my opinion. He shows the evils of his own country. He shows the evils of the Syrian government. He shows the evils of, you know, he's basically a man that has a heart for humanity. You know, he is a Muslim. He quotes from the Quran as he begins, etc. All right? But we've got to, let's break this down. We start at the 3-minute mark. In the beginning, he's really scolded by his own parliament, the head of the parliament there, because he's bringing the accusations against Erdogan, who at that time was a prime minister, but later becomes president of Turkey. And they're telling him to watch his accusations because he calls the President Erdogan a hypocrite. All right? Let's follow along. It starts off 3 minutes and 1 second. As you all know, many children were murdered with sarin gas in the Middle East. That's what he starts off with.
Sarin gazı kullanılarak binlerce çocuk katledildi. Katledildi, öldürüldü.
There were various accusations about
bu gazı kimlerin kullandığı yönünde çeşitli
who uses sarin gas in our media.
ithamlar yer aldı. Soruyorum.
My question is about Adnan Chief's public prosecutor. All right? So the media is one thing, but he's now going to bring you up factual information that happened based on arrest and cover-ups. And when you guys come to whether it be Kansas or Nashville, I'll share with you as well the arrest, the politicians, the money laundering, the weapons smuggling, and the cover-ups that went all the way to the White House. Oh, sorry, messed up. Back here. That's where he is. By the way, that's at the beginning where the parliament is, just so you can see that. He's before the Turkish parliament. The speaker, he addresses him. Let me show you where the speaker is. That's the House Speaker of the Parliament in Turkey, just so you have an idea of what's going on here. All right, so let's get back into the actual, where he says here.
Kimlerin kullandığı yönünde çeşitli ithamlar yer aldı. Soruyorum. Soruşturma numarası 2013.
He's asking about the Chief Public Prosecutor. Investigation case number 2013/351, and then of course in 2013/139 and /120 in 2012. These were indictments.
2013'e 139, iddianame numarası 2013'e 120, Adana Cumhuriyet Başsavcılığı. Korkmayın, savcı para...
Don't worry, the prosecutor is not from the parallel organization. He's playing politics on that one. The prosecutor in charge is acting in perfect harmony. He's basically showing, in other words, kind of like saying, no, don't worry about it. The prosecutor was not a Republican. He was actually, he wasn't a Democrat. He was a Republican. That's kind of like the way we do it in American, because, that's what it is. Well, it's truthful if it comes out of the Republican Party, but if it's a Democratic Party, they're all a bunch of liars. I can tell you from experience with my own time in the government, they're all liars on both sides of the fence. I mean, think about it. Jesus was taken up by Satan, showed all the kingdoms of the earth and said, bow down and worship me and I'll give them to you. And he wouldn't have nothing to do with it. Because no, they're not honorable men.
Bölgedeki iradesine de sadık bir savcı. Diyor ki, Türkiye'de...
It is, as I stated, let me back up.
It
is as stated by the prosecutor in this case that raw materials from manufacturing sarin gas were delivered to the ISIS terrorist organization. It wasn't ISIS bringing it in now. This is where we got to be clear. It was delivered to them through contacts to this group's members. So the prosecutor initiated an investigation about this. Here, please look at this. I am showing this to you. The prosecutor made arrest under that investigation. So the individuals were suspected to have carried out the transportation, were arrested and put in prison. The prosecutor ordered the telephones of those suspects to be wiretapped, which is also stated in the indictment. Okay, now keep in mind, the ones that were driving the trucks, these guys here are not the ISIS militants. They were instructed to deliver the sarin gas to them. Remember, if you'll notice, Seymour Hersh showed that the sarin gas through the rat line was brought from Libya into the hands of Prime Minister Erdogan at the time, to be gotten into the hands of the jihadists to use against the Syrian government. Mr. Minister of Justice Bozdag is also aware well of the details of this indictment because he himself went on air and made statements. But do you know what happened? In 1 week's time, that case was closed. The suspects were released and were allowed to leave Turkey by crossing over the Syrian border. Now I ask you, is that what you understand as justice? To set free people transporting sarin gas? I am asking, he says. One journalist states that this is much worse than all I had said before.
Türkiye
Do
Cumhuriyeti
you know who says that the Republic of Turkey
Türkiye Cumhuriyeti hükümetinin
has dispatched ammunition to Al-Qaeda terrorist organization
dönemin başbakanının talimatıyla El-Kaide
by orders of the Prime Minister at the time,
gönderdiğini kim söylüyor biliyor musunuz?
which is Erdogan? Let me tell you,
Adana valisi
Governor Adnan Hüseyin Avnikos.
Hüseyin Avni Coş tutanaklarda var.
Here are the records made by the governor here. If any of you would like to have them, you can photocopy them.
Diyor ki başbakanın talimatıyla ben bu tırla...
Okay, now miss that part. The governor states that he instructed the trucks to go there. The governor stated for the trucks to go there.
Başbakanın talimatıyla ben bu tırların
Under the Prime Minister's orders.
oraya gitmesini istiyorum diyor.
That's Erdogan. Do you know what Irfan Fidan, the prosecutor who arrested the journalist Khan Dündar, said?
Ne diyor biliyor musunuz? Can Dündar.
He said that Khan Dündar has not falsely defamed the government or the Prime Minister.
Diyor. Gerçek olan bir bilgiyi
He said that Khan Dündar merely disclosed a state secret, in other words, a fact.
devletin sırrını paylaşmıştır diyor. Peki Can
So what is Khan Dündar's article about? This was terrible. The Turkish government was cooperating with the U.S. to use sarin gas against the civilian population of Syria so that they could justify a broader war. And they called that a state secret. Didn't I remind you of the Clintons about the, the alleged issue about the Clintons, I should say, about, the Mina Air Base? And Bill says, I didn't know nothing about that. That was all under national security. We get the dope, sell the dope, get the money, buy the weapons, send it back to the Contras. Yeah. Troubling.
iftira olmayan
An article which by the prosecutor Fidan's own admission was not defamatory.
olmadığını tescil ettiği haberi neydi
It
arkadaşlar?
was about the weaponry that was sent to ISIS.
O silahların IŞİD'e gittiği yönündeki haber.
There it is again, Erdogan's lovely name right there in the article.
Yani
That is, our public prosecutor Fidan states that Khan Dündar
Sayın İrfan Fidan diyor ki Can Dündar hükümete iftira et.
did not falsely defame the government. He disclosed a fact, a state secret.
Bilgiyi paylaşıyor. Devletin sırrını ifşa ediyor. Şimdi bunun üzerine
Now here I am asking, maybe my words previously were insulting and hurtful.
deminki sözüm
So he says sorry.
yaralayıcı olmuş olabilir.
And I do apologize for that if they crossed the line.
Bahsettiğim maksadı aşmışsa
But I would like to address my question to your inner conscience. Listen to this here. This is really beautiful what he says.
sizden özür diliyorum. Ama vicdanlara şunu hitaben sormak ve sual etmek istiyorum. Diyorum ki arkadaşlar
Is this our understanding of justice, conscience, and perspective
adalet anlayışımız, bu mudur bizim vicdaniyetimiz
for bringing peace to the Middle East?
ve Orta Doğu'da barış getirmek?
We're almost done, guys.
Biz
Whom are we going to hold accountable for the children who were decapitated in Istanbul?
Tebrak'ta kafası kesilmiş çocukların hesabını kime soracağız? IŞİD'de
Whom are we going to hold accountable for the bloodbath committed by the terrorist organization
bir
ISIS?
terör örgütünün gerçekleştirmiş olduğu bu büyük katliamların hesabını kime soracağız? Kobani'de öldürülmüş
Whom are we going to hold responsible for the children murdered in Kobani? These were the Kurds, a little area of province in Syria called Kobani, that were murdered. And he's saying this because Turkey, in every case, was involved with the arming and supplying of these terrorist groups that caused all this mayhem in the country.
çocukların hesabını kime soracağız? Rejim güçleri
Whom are we going to bring to account for the children murdered by the regime's forces? Now he's literally talking about Syria now. That's what I say. He's not unbiased. He tells it like it is.
katlettiği çocukların hesabını kime soracağız? Biz sadece
If we are to criticize the regime forces only, which is Bashar al-Assad,
rejim güçlerini eleştirip IŞİD'in bölgede
and turned a blind eye to the massacre committed by ISIS in the region,
gerçekleştirdiği katliamlara kulak tıkayacaksak bu anlayış bizi
we are not headed in the right direction.
bir yere götürmez arkadaşlar. Aynı şekilde
Similarly, here you can see in the Doku Makler indictment,
bakınız burada görüyorsunuz. Dokumacılar iddianamesi. Ne diyor bu iddianame?
About the Ankara massacre. Now this was in Ankara. This is what caused them to justify going in the war. This is the part I didn't catch before. The Zurich massacre, right?
25. dönemde bu mecliste
Right after the joint refusal of ruling party and the Nationalist Party
iktidar partisinin yan yana gelerek reddettiği terör
to
komisyonu
form a terror commission during the 25th term of the government.
kurulmasının akabinde ortaya çıkan Ankara katliamı, Suruç katliamı gibi hadiseler olmuştu.
Hang on, we lost the. Okay.
Kurulmasının akabinde ortaya çıkan Ankara katliamı, Suruç katliamı
You all for sure know that.
olmuştu. Hepiniz yakinen biliyorsunuz. Bu iddianame diyor
That indictment states that those ISIS members
yüzlerce insanın hayatı
who murdered and injured hundreds of people in Ankara
Kalles IŞİD'çiler 3 yıl boyunca
were wiretapped and followed the state, followed by the state. All right? The state of Turkey knew they were going to do this.
devlet tarafından dinlenmiş, telefonları takip edilmiş.
Not a single operation was conducted to get them. Why?
Bir operasyon yapılmamış. Neden? Canlı bombaları...
They said because we were waiting for the suicide bombers to explode themselves. An open fact in parliament in Turkey that the very incident used to drag Turkey to justify them going into the war, this suicide bombing, that they had wiretapped and knew they were going to go do it, they would not stop them until they blew themselves up. How many innocent people then could have been saved as a result? So how can you wait for the suicide bombers to explode themselves in order to arrest them? But shut your eyes to journalists being arrested for journalism. You all for sure know him. Okay? Now, particularly the members of the ruling party. We'll stop at this point here. He goes on and says, the blood of the children that were killed by this sarin gas attack that was conducted by the sarin gas being placed into the hands of the ISIS militants crossing into the country of Syria was used against the Syrian people. He puts Erdogan as the very one that give the orders to send the trucks to the guys and let them take their sarin gas and leave the country. Now, we have all these proofs. This is like if this was happening in closed doors meeting at the White House or, before Congress in a congressional hearing, and this is being said in a congressional hearing, and yet it's behind closed doors. We don't never hear about it ourselves, but they're talking about it. This man comes and reveals what was being said before their parliament. And so when his government wouldn't hear him, he went on RT News and he shared part of that information with them on RT News. Because he was so convicted about what happened in his own country that they were involved in killing little children. And it wasn't just Turkey, it was the United States government, according to Seymour Hersh, what he discovered, that actually got the sarin gas into Erdogan's hands to use against them. Now, listen. By the way, here's the Kobani right here. Kobani massacre. ISIS killed my parents, cut my finger. You got the whole group of them on a billboard there of all the children that died. Syrian Kurdish woman wails for members of her family who were victims of the massacre committed by the Islamic State insurgents in the Syrian Kurdish town of Kobani. All right? Now, friends, and of course the article here just goes on and on about Seymour Hersh where they write about him and the different links to prove it, and which I shared some of those with you. This was the Pentagon trained Syria's al-Qaeda rebels in the use of chemical weapons, confirmed by CNN. And yet CNN and Fox News all say that Assad did it. This article was first published in April 2017 following the accusation directed against the Syrian government of using chemical weapons against its own people. In a bitter irony, CNN confirms in 2012 report that the al-Qaeda affiliate rebels were trained by Pentagon in the use of chemical weapons. This just blows me away. And now here's the bad thing. You got these propagandists out there, whether they be on mainstream media in America or whether they be on the mainstream media in Israel or in Europe or any other place, that are all calling for the destruction of the Syrian government, killing of Assad. And believe me, it's going to happen. I hate to say this. I hate to be the guy to bear the bad news, but I do believe they will actually kill President Assad. And unfortunately, Christians are being duped into believing that this is the right thing to do. Because you're hearing propaganda. You know, forget the Word of God. You know, I mean, in order for somebody to cheer for the death of Assad and the death of the Syrian people who did not do as they have been accused of doing. You know, the Bible clearly says, bear not false witness. But, oh, it's Assad, so we can bear false witness, right? Is that what it is? All this propaganda. I can understand mainstream media doing it. They have an agenda anyway. They're owned by, you know, the deep state, big oil, big gas, you know, the arms industry. They all own the big media companies. So I can expect them to do it. But when a man professes to believe in Jesus Christ, to believe Yeshua to be the Messiah, and doesn't know any more about the Word of God than to tell you it's just okay to go murder your neighbor. Forget Jesus' own words where he says, love your neighbor as yourself, and this you'll fulfill the whole law. Forget the fact that the Syrians came when Jesus was here 2,000 years ago, and they believed his words. Forget the fact that the Christian community that lives in Syria are the very descendants of those that believed the words of Jesus 2,000 years ago. Oh, I'm sorry, we're there protecting the Christians. Not according to the Christians that have written me, they're not. They said their only true hope is President Bashar al-Assad. Because if the jihadists get their way, they're going to behead everybody. They behead children. The U.S. State Department backs the White Helmets, who their members beheaded a little boy as young as 14 years old. They put their women in prison clothes. It looks like they're all a bunch of prisoners. Their heads covered. They're all going to an execution the way they do them. You know, Isaiah 17. We're going to look at several passages here. Isaiah 17, chapter 17. The burden of Damascus, behold, Damascus is taken away from being a city, and it shall be a ruinous heap. All right? The cities of Aurora are forsaken. They shall be for flocks, which shall lie down, and none shall make them afraid. The fortress also shall cease from Ephraim, and the kingdom from Damascus, and the remnant of Aram, or the remnant of Syria, shall be as the glory of the children of Israel, saith the Lord of hosts. In other words, they're going to follow in the steps of Israel and what happened to them. They'll be scattered throughout the nations. All right? So, the important thing here, though, is that the fortress also shall cease from Ephraim. Why? Damascus falls. Ephraim is parts of the descendants of the house of Israel that ended up believing that Yeshua was the Messiah. You know, it was funny, Paul was going to Damascus to kill all those Christians that were living there. Had Paul got there and not been stopped by the Lord himself in vision, he would have fulfilled the prophecy right there, and he would have been the one that would fulfill that. The fortress also shall cease from Ephraim, and the kingdom from Damascus. Why? Because he would have killed them all. Imprisoned them. The ones he didn't kill, he'd have them imprisoned. That's what Paul was going to do. All right? Now the thing is, here's the oddity. All you got to do, go down to verse, you know, you can read it all, but when you get down to, say, verse 9, 10, now you find out who. Okay? You'll find out who does it. In that day shall his strong cities be as the forsaken places, which were forsaken from before the children of Israel. After the manner of woods and lofty forests, it shall be a desolation. Shemama. Shemama means a desolation. See? V'hayataha shemama. Okay? Azavo mipnei b'nei Yisrael v'hayataha shemama. All right? And so Israel, right before their own faces, and this is not just the state of Israel either. This implicates the 12 tribes of Israel, which is part of the house of Israel and the house of Judah, that together, through their military actions that they are doing in the region, brings about the demise of Damascus. See, for thou hast forgotten the God of thy salvation. See? This is why they do it. And thou hast not been mindful of the rock of thy stronghold. Therefore thou didst plant plants of pleasantness, and didst set it with slips of a stranger. All right? Clearly, both houses of Israel are defined in this very passage here. For thou hast forgotten the God of thy salvation, the house of Judah. We could say this about the house of Israel as well. And thou hast not been mindful of the rock of thy stronghold. Clearly, the believing Christians of today. Because we know that Christ Jesus is that rock. We know that He is our salvation. All right? And in fact, what's interesting, I think in the Septuagint it actually uses the word Savior in there. All right? So, it's clear that it represents Israel, both those that still believe in Judaism and those that believe in Yeshua as Messiah. And that's how we know who is at fault. And God says that you plant these plants of pleasantness and did set it with slips of a stranger. In other words, you did evil there to cause the demise of the city. And the day that thy planting thou didst make it to grow, in the morning thou didst make thy seed, to blossom a heap of boughs in the day of grief and of desperate pain. What the United States, what Europe, and what the modern state of Israel has done in the land of Syria was to bring about grief and desperate pain. We're guilty of it. Because why? We forgot the God of our salvation, and we're not mindful of the rock of our stronghold. Ah, the uproar of many peoples that roar like the roaring of seas and the rushing of nations, that rush like the rushing of mighty waters. There's Daniel's prophecy right there. The nations shall rush like the rushing of many waters, but he shall rebuke them, and they shall flee far off, and shall be chased as the chaff of the mountains before the wind, and like the whirling dust before the storm. At the evening tide, behold terror. Before the morning, they are not. This is the portion of them that spoil us, and the lot of them that rob us. It's a dreadful thing that's about to happen. Now, if we look at Jeremiah, in chapter 49, Damascus, Hamath is ashamed, and Arpad, for they have heard evil tidings. They are melted away. There is trouble in the sea, and it cannot be quiet. If they do this staged chemical attack and the U.S. targets Damascus as a retaliation, if it anywhere in there draws Russia into the conflict, it will definitely be a battle on the seas. But is Putin playing that as well? Is that part of the New World Order plan to break the nationalism of the United States and Russia as well? How Damascus is waxed feeble. She turneth herself to flee, trembling hath seized on her, anguish and pains have taken hold of her as a woman in travail. How is the city of praise left unrepaired, the city of my joy? Therefore her young men shall fall in her broad places, and the men of war shall be brought to silence in that day, saith the Lord of hosts. I will kindle a fire in the wall of Damascus, and it shall not devour, and it shall devour the palaces of Ben-Hadad. Now that's interesting, because this is a prophecy of the future, and oddly enough, Ben-Hadad is mentioned, his palaces, not him himself, but his palaces. If we go to the book of 2 Kings, and we look here, I'm in verse 7, I forget the chapter, let me look real quick again at the chapter, chapter 8, 2 Kings. And it could be a verse or two off in King James, I never remember how that works. But this is why I believe that President Bashar al-Assad will probably die. He was not a bad man. He's not been a bad man. He's tried to do the best he can. Now, his father was not a good man. And neither was Ben-Hadad's father that good of a man. But Elisha came to Damascus, the Bible says, and Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria, it says Aram here, which is Syria, was sick. And it was told him, saying, the man of God is come hither. And the king said to Hazael, take a present in thy hand, and go and meet the man of God, and inquire of the Lord by him, saying, shall I recover of this sickness? Now that's a humble man. He believed the prophet of Israel. And so Hazael went to meet him and took a present with him, even every good thing of Damascus, 40 camels burdened, and came and stood before him, speaking about Elisha, and said, thy son Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, has sent me to thee, saying, shall I recover of this sickness? And Elisha said unto him, go say unto him, thou shalt surely recover, howbeit the Lord hath shown me that he shall surely die. Now, this may not necessarily mean that Assad will be killed in battle, but what does it definitely mean? You see, Bashar al-Assad is on the verge of taking back his entire country. It looks as if we were to look at the case and say he will be victorious and will actually finally regain Syria, and they can begin to rebuild. But I cannot help but wonder if this is not a compound meaning in modern days, showing that Syria will fall and not rebuild with their leader, President Bashar al-Assad, and his wife. Remember his wife in prayer, by the way. She's fighting cancer. And he settled his countenance steadfastly upon him until he was ashamed. And the man of God, and Elisha said unto him, go say unto him, thou shalt surely recover, howbeit the Lord hath shown me that he shall surely die. And he settled in his countenance steadfast upon him until he was ashamed. And the man of God wept. And Hazael said, why weep, my Lord? And he answered, because I know the evil that thou wilt do unto the children of Israel. Their strongholds wilt thou set on fire, and their young men wilt thou slay with sword, and wilt dash in pieces their little ones, and rip up their women with child. That will happen when these evil, wicked governments that are toppling Bashar al-Assad and will put in their place the most crooked, wicked, evil, Al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda, every ungodly man they can possibly put in there will take over that government, and then they will turn on the children of Israel, and they will murder these modern Israelis in a battle. You know, there's still a battle that has not come to Israel as of yet, and 2/3 of Israel will die in that battle. This group here will be a part of it. The very ones that topple Assad as a result of the help of the U.S. and their allies to bomb Bashar al-Assad. It may not be this Idlib battle where this happens at, but somewhere along the line before this war is over in the Middle East, they're going to topple Damascus. Something will give way, some kind of false flag attack, and then finally the U.S. will just unleash utterly unbelievable attack. It could spiral out of control if that little young man Nathan was right that had the near-death experience. It could get much bigger than just Syria. What said Elisha to thee? And he answered, he told me that thou wouldest surely recover. And it came to pass on the morrow that he took the coverlet and dipped it in water, spread it on his face, that he died, and Hazael reigned in his stead. The people that he thought he could trust, just like in the case of Bashar al-Assad, he thought he could trust his own people, and they turned on him. They didn't want freedom in the Middle East. We also got now US, UK, and France prepare a new strike against Syria. Russian MOD has brought out, showing how that they're all involved in it. And another thing that happened too that's kind of a little bit troubling as well, the Russian embassy called the escort of the British fighter jets dangerous. British Air Force is now flying out of Romania, and when the Russian forces were flying over the Black Sea, they sent their planes up to intercept Russian territory where they were flying at. And now they're being intercepted by the British. Provocations are being made. It's just a matter of time, friends, before something goes dangerously wrong. I wished I could say I was wrong. And I hope I am wrong. I really do. I hope that Damascus is not destroyed more than it already has been. It would be nice to see that Assad, they would actually finally win the war and they could rebuild, and that maybe this is for some other time. But it doesn't look that way. Friends, if anything we're doing is a blessing to you and you feel in your heart to support this work, please do. It's not easy standing on the front line telling the people the truth. I hold back in calling names in some issues here out of respect. I know those that I am speaking about indirectly here, they've not held back on calling my name on more than one occasion. And it's become almost an idolatry, the way that individuals are lifted up. We don't need to lift up a man, regardless of who he is. Jesus Christ is the only man we should be lifting up. Yeshua HaMashiach. Pray for us. We need your prayers. My wife needs your prayers for the sickness that she still battles. I know some people have asked me to set up a GoFundMe. I'll do that because the doctors have told us what it will take for her final round here that we trust will truly defeat this, what she's battling. She doesn't like me using any certain words, terminology, so I won't. But your support of this ministry and to further what we're doing is greatly appreciated. I have uploaded on our website. If you go to our website, IsraeliNewsLive.org, you can see here as you scroll down on the right-hand side of the page here, the Kansas Conference, December the 2nd. It's right here on the right-hand side. Just look for the picture of me and my wife together. We don't know for sure, but we may end up having to charge for seating here. Like the conference here in Orlando, we had limited seating. And we had about 150, almost 160 people had registered for that conference, but about 60 people ended up not coming. Now, a few people let me know that they weren't able to come, and I appreciated that. But we actually had a small enough group that we didn't have to expand. We were just right at 100 people that ended up coming, but when we had more and more requests to come, we expanded we doubled the size so that we could accommodate the people to come, and then the people were not able to, were different issues, I'm sure, people were not able to come. But that puts a heavy burden on us to cover that expense when the people are unable to come. So we haven't decided as of yet, but we may have a small charge for this conference here. And it would be a non-refundable charge, mainly so that if we run into, so that way we know we can cover the cost of the facility. We'll make it small enough to where it's not that expensive so people will be able to come. If for some reason you want to come and you don't have the funds, I will reserve a certain amount of tickets that would not have a charge on it. But you can click on this article here. And if you would, just so we can kind of get an idea of who is coming, leave us a comment. It says here, leave a reply. Just put a comment in here. Hey, we're planning on coming to the conference, and you can say myself, my wife, my husband, whatever the case may be, or a group of us about 10, just so we can start getting an idea. And then that way too, you don't have to leave personal information as far as how to contact you. You don't have to leave your name, things like that. I don't want to put anybody on the spot there, but we're just trying to get an idea of who all would be coming. And then as soon as we can figure out how we can do this, how we're going to put this together, we'll then include the information in the article. I may end up putting a special email just for the conference, and I'll let you know here what's going on about that. Don't forget to Nashville, Tennessee, or Lebanon, Tennessee, the conference there at the chpcenter.com. You can get your make your reservation there. There's no charge for that conference at all. We had friends there that have offered their facility. We are looking at possibly doing a small little group meeting in the mountains of North Carolina very soon. We haven't set a date on it. It would be after the Nashville conference, but we may do that in October, a meeting in North Carolina. I have had people asking me about Pensacola as well. I am thinking about maybe doing a small meeting in Pensacola. It would be somewhere between the 10th and the 11th on one of those 2 days there, but I have not made any plans yet. That's a very, very serious issue for me to hold a meeting in that area. I can't say why, but you'll know why. If I do, you'll know. But if I do, we'll have to do our own venue on this as well. I was offered very kindly by one brother that wrote me of a congregation that would be kind enough to let us use their facility. But because of the sensitivity of this meeting, we would have to deal with that a little different. Anyway, blessings to you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being a support to this ministry. You can do so right here on Israeli News Live. And also, if you're not able to contribute here, but you want to, just go over to Patreon. Patreon, patreon.com/Israeli News Live. You can go there. There you can make a pledge there if you like to do that, plus get the video benefit that we share there that we don't share here on Israeli News Live. And of course, as always, you can send to our regular address here as well, here at Champions Gate, Florida. I don't live at Champions Gate, so I know sometimes people think, oh, Brother Steve lives there. No, I don't live there. That's just like a P.O. box number, but don't put P.O. box because it won't work right. Just number 442, Champions Gate, Florida, 33896. Of course, the street address, 8297 Champions Gate. Blessings to you. Thank you for watching. I know it's kind of long-winded tonight, but I really felt the urgency to tell you these things that are going on. I'm Steve Benoon with Israeli News Live. Erev Tov.